Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. Nick Mullens has taken me higher than Josh Dobbs, but that still means that everyone is still blind.
Hey, this is Arif from the Wide Left Substack. For once, Sam was late to the podcast. What's up with that?
And I'm Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings, somehow leaving Las Vegas up.
Locked On Sports Minnesota Podcast. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota Football Party.
What's up, everyone? It's a Monday edition of the Minnesota Football Party, coming off of a zany, enthralling, in a weird way, snooze fest. A 3-0 Vikings win that was so bad, it was entertaining. And we'll talk about it today on the Minnesota Football Party. Luke Braun was at the game. We'll get his unique perspective. He's been in Vegas. Arif Hasan joins as well. Luke Inman out today. He'll be back, though, for the Wolves postcast tonight. Don't worry. And I'm Sam Ekstrom. We're really glad you joined us today. Plenty of Vikings defense to talk about, woeful offense, and an update on our Week 14 parlays. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code, all lowercase, LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Fellas, 3-0. Vikings win in a biblically bad football game that's a little easier to smile about when the Vikings win. Luke Braun was in attendance. Let's get your unique perspective, Luke. You had the under in our parlay.
Yes.
Genius on your part. Did you have the under in real life?
Oh, yeah. Yes. I hammered the under and had a physical ticket. We cashed it last night. That we were laughing. So we had a couple other ones. We had an interception parlay that only didn't hit because Josh Dobbs got benched, because if he stayed in, he was going to throw one. So we were looking at each other.
His very first throw went through the guy's hand.
Yeah, we looked at each other because we both went in on that, and we were like, that was it. That was our one. So we were having fun. We were there with a couple of Raiders fans as well, and we were all just looking at each other like, we can't. There's no trash to talk. We can't talk. We can't say anything. No, nobody's done anything.
This, though. If that first pick had been a pick, that wouldn't have helped you with the over/under, because that would have gone for 6.
Yeah, I think I would have still been all right.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it would have opened up the scoring. That would have
true.
Opened up the
that would have opened up the whole game, changed the game.
Yeah.
I think the weirdest phenomenon of that game, because it was the estimation was like 54% Vikings fans. I think it was more 2-1 Vikings fans. Honestly, it was packed with purple. It was insane. It was like a Chargers game.
Well, the estimation was like geographic in nature, right? And someone had mentioned,
I thought it was like ticket sale data.
Right, that's what I mean, right?
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, and so like it didn't account for the fact that like before the Raiders moved there, Las Vegas had a pretty decent Vikings contingent. That there was your group coming from LA, which is typically a group of Raiders fans, but in this case,
LA is a Raiders town, so there's a lot of people coming there. But there's a lot of people that came. Like we were a split group, but only one person bought the tickets, so I'm sure all of those tickets counted in that data as Vikings tickets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I checked this for tonight's Packers-Giants game. So the over-under is 37 there, which is less than the Vikings-Raiders over-under. You could, if you wanted to, you could crank down the alternate point total in Packers-Giants to as low as 9.5, and that would have been worth plus 8,000. So in theory, if you had gone as low as you could on Vikings-Raiders, you probably could have gotten like plus 9,000, plus 10,000. For a 3-point total.
Should have done that, idiot. Jeez.
Yeah. So the funniest thing about this was because it was a split crowd. So like anytime they were on third down, it was somebody was getting loud, right? Mm-hmm. On both sides of the ball. And the only time the crowd really felt like a true stadium crowd was at the end of the half when both teams got booed off the field.
Unbelievable.
It was. I was like, there's no way that was just the Vikings fans or just the Raiders fans. That was everybody.
That's so good.
Deserved
for sure.
unbelievably deserved. There's so many historical nuggets that we're going to get into in this game that I've got. Hopefully you guys do too. We'll do some nerdy stats around the awfulness of this football game. These were the Raiders' plays from within Vikings territory in the game. Of course, it did include a 38-yard pitch and catch to Hunter Renfrow. Other than that, Raiders, these are all the plays in Vikings territory that they ran. Incompletion, penalty, punt, negative rush, 1 yard pass completion, penalty, fumble. Those are all the plays in Vikings territory, aside from the one big play that got them in the red zone the one time they were there.
Dude, that red zone possession scared me. I was like, oh, God, we're going to see something.
Like, this is all it's going to take. Yeah.
And then there's the bobble. The bobble on the sideline by, was it Myers?
Oh, yeah.
It's right.
That was very
well, the
close.
second bobble, right? Because
it was it had to be the second bobble.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Raiders fans that I was with, we're every call, we're like arguing about it. Right. And as soon as it plays, I'm surprised they played it in the home stadium because it was like evidence against the catch, but they played it in the stadium and we saw that it was the second bobble. And they both just look at me like
yeah.
Here's the thing, though.
They admitted.
If they had ruled that the second bobble was an element of control, I would have been comfortable with it. I would have been like, yeah, but that's intentional. He's controlling it, bringing it. Like, I would have been.
Oh,
fine
I
with
see
it.
what you mean. Sure.
Yeah. Because the first bobble, he doesn't control the ball, but the second one, it's clearly in his possession. He's controlling it. He's just bringing it in. I would have been fine with it. I do think that that's probably the correct ruling. I'm surprised they overturned it on review. I think the rules analyst they had on, was it Serator? It concluded that it should have been a catch. So, like, I get
really?
Blandino. It was Blandino.
Like, for the same, like, for the Adam Thielen in Carolina, that one from a bunch of years ago before they changed the rule, like that kind of deal.
Yeah. But it probably the correct rule. But yeah, very funny because that one was
interesting,
pretty close. Yeah, I think the Hunter Renfrow one, that wasn't Byron Murphy in coverage, right? So Byron Murphy's worst coverage rep wasn't even a bad coverage rep. It's the 2-minute drill, or not the 2-minute drill, essentially the Hail Mary lateral, right? The 24-yarder to Devontae Adams that you wouldn't ever count against him.
I mean, it was a good game defensively for everybody. But yeah, secondary deserves, give them their flowers too. Raiders didn't even want to try throwing the ball down the field. It was like the same. It was the Justin Fields strategy because that worked out so well for the Bears. It was like, oh, let's do these little bubbles.
Hey, the Bears won, so it must have been a good strategy, right?
Yeah, and
how that works.
The way the way the Bears offense looked in the weeks sandwiched around that game suddenly makes the defensive performance look even more respectable. But this was the first 3-0 final in the league in 16 years. 16 years ago was played in a monsoon.
Yeah,
the mud game.
There's that.
There's
that clip of the punt
would just stick in the turf. No one could run. No one could pass. This was an indoor game. There are no excuses.
My nerdy stat of the day was that this is the lowest scoring indoor game ever.
Yes, and that's
never been 3-0 indoors before. There was one Bud Grant game that was at the Met.
Against the Packers, 1971. Yep. That's actually
it might have been
one that. Yeah,
that's a bizarre.
That was isolated on the broadcast. Yeah.
Nice.
The Vikings had 87 total yards in that Bud Grant game, but they picked off the Packers 3 times. The Packers had 300 total yards in the game and didn't score.
That's amazing. Oh my God, I would be so mad if you outgained the other team 300 to 87 and didn't score.
That's incredible.
Oh,
that was 1971, right? Yeah. The 1969 Vikings led the league in scoring, and I believe also had like the shortest yards to score because their field position was nuts because of how good their defense was.
Yeah, I believe it. Paul Krause had a pick in that game.
69 to 71.
Nice.
By, I think, points per game was the lowest 3-year stretch of points per game ever.
Fantastic.
That tracks if you look at the turnover numbers, like just look at the Vikings reference page on 1971. Turnover machines Like the offenses were so bad in that era. I don't know if they were just like starting to try to throw the football more and everybody was bad at it. Everyone just turned the ball over.
Everyone just threw more interceptions back then, and we had Paul Krause.
Yeah. It's like, I don't want to like diminish, because if you adjust for era, we're way off topic. If you adjust for era,
this is good.
The Vikings' ability to generate turnovers and the Vikings' defense are still one of the best of all time. Even after you're like, hey, everyone was like throwing 3 picks a game. It's like, yeah, but the Vikings' defense were getting like 6. So
this game belonged in the Bud Grant throwbacks, I feel like.
Yeah, honestly. Very spiritually Vikings game. Yeah, for sure.
Yes. And then it was really stupid and you can't take anything away from it.
Yeah.
And still a very meaningful win. Like in the playoff picture. An extremely
really meaningful.
Win. Yeah.
With the Rams and Seahawks losing, which helps a lot.
Gigantic.
Yeah, the Vikings probability of making the playoffs jumped to like 59%, and now they no longer need to rely on winning 2 of the final 3 games of the season, because I think any win that the Vikings have over the next 4 games jumps them up to 85% win probability or playoff probability.
Yeah, it might come down to that Packers game too, because that's going to determine
that'll be a big
potentially the tiebreaker, and obviously huge swing in the standings. Let's keep delving into that, the ugliness, the hideousness, the stench of yesterday's game after a word from DoorDash. It's highly probable you would have wanted like a distraction during yesterday's game and, eat away the terribleness of the game with food. And you can do that with DoorDash. You can get pizza, wings, soda, burgers, or buns from the grocery store. Make your own burgers. Get it all delivered without missing the game if you just use the DoorDash app. Chips, dip, nachos. There's so many options during a football game. You want to have that buffet with friends over, but you don't want to be stuck in the kitchen? DoorDash. Groceries, restaurants, retail, straight to your door. Very easy to use app. Takes 2 minutes to order, and then just a few minutes more to get that delivered straight to your front door. Could even do contactless delivery, so you don't have to run up and awkwardly talk to someone, answer it, all that. Get 50% off right now, up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. When you download the DoorDash app, enter code LOCKED23. That's 50% off, up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. When you download the DoorDash app, enter code LOCKED23. Subject to change. Terms apply. Let's run this, because I've got at least one more of these.
Analytics fans rejoice. It's time to get educated.
Whoa, you're blowing my mind right now.
With the nerdy stat of the day.
I think we've already burned through a few of these. I've got one more on the Raiders. 64 years of Raiders franchise data. First time they've ever been shut out with less than 4 yards per play and third down percentage less than 25%. Woeful. Terrible. They should retire
very bad
all of the Raiders NFL Films voiceovers because of what they put on the football field yesterday.
That's so harsh.
Yeah.
The autumn wind is gone.
Autumn wind. Oh, man.
Steve Sable lost a little bit of his eternal soul.
John Madden
just disintegrated away.
Yeah, just went into the ether.
John Madden's ghost fled.
Fled into the night.
Retroactively being taken out of the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
But so
wait, I love that. Every time you get shut out, one of your Hall of Famers loses his gold jacket.
Amazing.
Score a point.
Yeah. Some teams have built up a buffer, right? Like the Broncos could get rid of Floyd Little, no one's gonna care, right? So,
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, some teams have more to lose on this one than others. Okay, so we did burn through a couple of my nerdy stats, but I'll do the nerdy stats that we kind of burned through, but technically didn't because we referenced them. Which is the average depth of target for Aiden O'Connell was 4.3 yards downfield, which of all football games going back to when RBs Don't Matter has data for, which technically goes back to 2001, but that's not how far back the ADOT data goes. I think it's like 2012 or something. That is in the 3rd percentile. Nice. Somehow even worse than that, Josh Dobbs' completion percentage over expected. Now, mind you, this is not the next gen stats version, so it doesn't take into account, how close the defender was or how close the sideline was. It's
just an ADOT stat.
Yeah, it's primarily an ADOT stat. And like a field position stat. His expected completion percentage was 70%. His actual completion percentage was 47.6. The CPOE minus 22.4, which is in the 2nd percentile.
Oh no.
So 3rd percentile, no. 2nd percentile. I would argue not all of those incompletions were his fault, but I don't want to get too far into Josh Dobbs' apologetics because he played bad. He was bad at football. I don't want to overshadow that fact, but man, he also did not get much help.
Yeah,
there were
at
least from where I was sitting.
Go ahead. Yeah,
sorry. At least from where I was sitting, there were a lot of those passes where, like, there was one to KJ Osborne where he ran like a hitch and he was sitting there for like beat wide open waiting for that. And by the time the ball finally got there, the defender's in there, gets his hand in there, and I think broke it up. But then I looked at my phone and everybody on Twitter was calling it a drop. So maybe there was a replay that showed something I didn't. But like that felt like it was all the time. It's like every single pass was high and behind and a literal
Very
Justin
high.
Jefferson hospital ball because he got sent to the hospital because of a bad ball. Like, come on. It was very late and bad. And a lot of just nonsense. I think you're going to see some open people on the All-22 that Dobbs just didn't see and like took sacks.
So the one thing that kind of sucks about the Jefferson one, obviously besides the actual fact of the injury, is that that's one of the times that Dobbs threw a ball on time, made a correct read, and I personally don't think that route against that coverage is by itself hospital ball worthy. Like a lot of people are like, you throw it over the middle, there's a defender there, that's a hospital ball. It's the fact that
it's the lateness of it. That when it's that like that middle read thing and there's a high safety, the instruction to the receiver is run as fast as you can and trust the quarterback's going to get you there in time. And it's just one step late.
I wouldn't call it lateness more than I would call it inaccuracy because I think he gets rid of the ball on time. It's because he throws it so high. Jefferson has to stop and just jump up.
Well, it's high and then it gets air under it and it goes slower.
Yeah, exactly. So So I think that that's an accuracy problem because you throw that route against that coverage all day. That's what that route is for. Mm-hmm. Of course, in a situation where you've got a cover 4 type safety, they're going to have to nail the crosser. That's the whole point of their role there. But you throw that route because that's the reason they have to nail the crossers because that's a new assignment because that route beats that coverage. So that's like really annoying because it's the few times that he is in the timing of the offense from like a rhythm perspective. Again, because he threw it high, it's late, but from a rhythm perspective, and it just doesn't work. There's also times where like he's throwing it high and the receiver needs to adjust. And I'm not saying that because it's a receiver's fault, although sometimes it is. But like, for example, there's one to KJ Osborne. He throws it high. KJ Osborne is covered. It's not a great idea to throw it to him. He throws it high. And that the height of that ball is one reason that Osborne is the only one that could get his hands on it because he throws it over the defender. But honestly, what Osborne needs to do is track the ball better and just move upfield. Now, that's not a typical thing that you need.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. The one
and it's just like it's like constantly that kind of thing where like Kirk Cousins wouldn't have thrown it like that. The receiver wouldn't have to adjust to it like that. But we're in a new reality, and you just have to adjust. And there were a couple of times where receivers made mistakes because they had to do stuff that they probably wouldn't have had to do with Cousins as the quarterback. And it made Dobbs' bad day, very bad day, look worse.
PFF drops 6 for the Vikings.
6? Really?
6? Nick, I'm telling you.
And they have a very strict like I've had this conversation with PFF only had like I think I don't know what it is now, but a couple of weeks ago they had like 2 drops on the whole season for TJ Hawkinson. And everybody's like, that's the most insane stat I could ever think. Because if that ball is contested, they won't count it. If it's not like in the frame, they won't count it as a drop. Like it's a really strict definition of a drop that a lot of people I think rightfully can disagree with. So for them to say 6, that they're probably more obvious than I could see from my seats then.
And Hawkinson did not have any. 0 on Hawkinson, despite
that fade, I think, doesn't count as a drop to them.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. One, I think he should have, but it's not a drop.
Yeah, failed completion, I think, is their term for it.
Yeah.
So they'll still downgrade him, but they won't call it a drop.
Yeah, what's kind of funny is that entering this week, Kirk Cousins, with 20 drops, had 3 fewer than the league leader heading into week 14. This is a persistent problem on this offense. 6 drops is wild to me. I would have said that there were probably 4 drops. Just I haven't been counting them in my head. It was just feels like this is a 4-drop game. 6 is crazy, but also there were a lot of instances in the replay where it looks like a defender broke it up quick, and in the replay you see, hey, they got their hands on it. The defender didn't get their hands on the ball. I don't know if that KJ Osborne one is one of them. I'm trying to remember, but there were a couple, especially on comeback routes, where that was entirely in the defender's control. And the Jalen Naylor one was brutal because that one was actually accurate, actually on time, and it goes through his hands.
Oh, that one,
his helmet,
his face, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just okay, bud. Yep. And I think that was after KJ Osborne was briefly benched, and it was I guess for Jalen Naylor. And Jalen Naylor does his Jalen Naylor stuff for 4 plays, and they're like, all right, let's get KJ Osborne back out there. And then Brandon Powell gets hurt, and it's all right, well, Jalen Naylor, you gotta be out.
And then Jalen Naylor gets concussed.
Jalen Naylor gets concussed.
Yeah. Receiving core did not have a great day. Arif's dead. Health-wise. Catch-wise, this was a miserable offensive performance. Josh Dobbs' last 3 games, and this includes kind of a decent half against Denver, 59%, 2 touchdowns, 5 picks, 9 sacks, 3 fumbles, 30 points produced. That's an average of 10 per game. Not great. The Mullens era begins, and Braun and I were on team Jaron Hall, but I'm okay with this outcome because Mullens did exactly what I expected him to do, which was throw with conviction, not always accurately, but at least on time, which I expected from him based on what we saw in the preseason. And I'm 99.9% sure that he gets the start against Cincinnati, and I think he probably gives you a chance to win. Agreed?
Yeah, I thought that's a move that O'Connell should have made in the Monday Night Bears game at halftime. So I say good move 5 quarters late.
Sure. It's interesting. So I think, the drops problem, I think, kind of underscores it. It's an instance where Joshua Dobbs played poorly, but the surrounding environment, the context of his play, made him look worse than he was. His statistics are worse than his actual play. Nick Mullens is in a situation where statistics are better than his actual play. His first pass was tipped up, and Hawkinson just happened to catch it, right? It's I'm not going to argue that was turnover worthy, but it was close-ish,
a little later and it's picked, which after that was my first thought, and I was like, okay, well, if that was a Dobbs throw, that's a pick because that would have been a little later.
Yes, it would have been later, yeah. But it's a scenario where the statistics make Nick Mullens look better than he was, and all of that can be true, and Nick Mullens can still have played better, right? Which I find very funny. But it was kind of rough watching it, but he was very decisive, mostly on time. The Jalen Naylor dig route, probably that's Jalen Naylor's fault, but he did throw behind Naylor. So, maybe that was on time, maybe that was, not, but that was probably the area where you pick on his timing, probably only that throw, but he was on time. He understood the offense and processed it quickly. Just wasn't very accurate. His arm, in my opinion, is not crazy strong, although I think we tend to focus on that too much when it comes to former Kyle Shanahan quarterbacks, because I don't think it's actually a bad arm or anything like that. It's just we tend to assume they're their bad arms.
It's fine. Yeah, it's just it's not like a Matt Stafford weapon, but it's fine.
Yeah. And so there's like limitations and stuff like that. But I think that because you can call your offense and expect it to be executed to some degree, it's probably just going to be Nick, because you constantly have to adjust for Joshua Dobbs. They had a bunch of read option plays in there. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to say Dobbs gave it every time, because there's some situations where he tried to pull it and the running back like just was holding on. He was like, give me the ball.
Yeah.
Surprised there were no fumbles at the mesh point. But there's
Yeah,
like,
I'm pretty sure he wasn't supposed to pull that one anyways. I think Ty Chandler was right there.
Yeah. Well, I think there's two instances, but yeah. The
Okay.
one that the broadcast highlighted, I think, was the Ty Chandler. Yeah. But yeah, and it's like, okay, one of the things is like, you can say Dobbs needs a read option offense in order to be effective. You can say that. That's true. If you don't practice your mesh point stuff, that's really difficult to do correctly. Really difficult. And so you can say that and you can try and implement it, but it's going to be limited in its application. Plus, running quarterbacks aren't necessarily good at read option. Michael Vick was not a good read option quarterback, right? Like you have to practice it and be good at that particular skill of reading in order to be a good read option quarterback. So there's that, right? I don't think he necessarily made the right reads, but whatever, right? And there's more moving pockets and stuff like that. And it's great that like the offense was changed to accommodate Joshua Dobbs, and that didn't work. And so now you can just go back to your offense and just run it with Nick Mullens, which, I mean, it's not going to be great probably, but it's going to score points, which
like in a true camp competition, I wonder who wins, right? Where everybody gets a training camp and everybody gets to know the playbook. But like the fact of the reality is Josh Dobbs doesn't get that. He just is going to have that disadvantage all year, right? And we've known that the whole time.
It's
we just didn't have to live like that. We
Yeah.
didn't have to be installing things on the fly anymore. We did in the Atlanta game. Nobody was healthy. We did in the Saints game. Nobody was healthy. We just don't have to anymore. And it was very clear that teams had tape on Josh Dobbs. They knew how to defend him. And we could just move off of this. And I think it's just a little bit too reluctant to like ruin the psyche of a quarterback that I don't think you're going to bring back.
Yeah, in like some ways, it's like, okay, this is like unfair to Dobbs or whatever, and sure,
It's super unfair
it
to
is,
Dobbs.
but that's what the NFL is, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's no way to make it fair. So
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
no shade on Dobbs himself. He's been in a really, really hard situation, and wish him the best wherever he ends up, whether it's in camp with the Vikings or elsewhere. But it's like those circumstances are not unavoidable. We can just go to a guy that doesn't have those circumstances.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I
will
asked
say
this question. Go ahead.
Before we move on or whatever, I want to add that I was compiling all of the links to our show for like an invoice that I send in so I can get paid by the show, and I was reading the comment section because I hate myself, and right. And actually, our YouTube comments are actually very good relative to most YouTube comments. They're actually quite good. But I always find reasons to find grievance, right? So, so I'm going through them, and the one that occurred after the Saints game, the second Dobbs game, where Sam was like, "So Joshua Dobbs is really good, right?" And I'm like, "Look, I don't want to. I like most of it is me saying we're playing with house money. I don't want to complain too much. This is fine. This is fun. This is great. This is all good, but this is not going to be sustainable. He's not going to be able to do this long term. A lot of this was just luck going his way." And the comments were ripping me apart. Guess
Case
what?
Keenum all over again. It's 2017 all over again.
If only, Sam. If only it was as good as that. No. Guess what? Comment section. I was right. You were wrong. Numbers never lie.
Arif just dropped the mic. He just literally dropped the mic right there. Got to check.
I won't
out
get in the
the
way of anybody dunking on YouTube comments. Yeah, go off.
video.
Yeah, you do it all the time. It's great.
Yeah.
And we appreciate the comments. Helps other people find the show.
I really
Keep
enjoy
commenting.
the comments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please keep commenting so we can dunk on you further. Thank you very much.
Injury news. Let's just put a bow on that. I think all of it looks a little better than it did in the moment. Like
Yeah.
Jefferson, you're thinking lacerated kidney.
Yeah.
But they're
He's
saying,
in the
okay,
hospital. What's going on?
yeah, punctured lung. But no, they're optimistic about him, maybe even playing Saturday. O'Neill, we all thought, Achilles, ankle sprain. Okay, not good. but it's not Achilles, maybe not season ending. Madison, ankle sprain. All right. And Dalton Reisner, I mean, he goes down like he got shot. It looked like that he was going to be out and came right back in. So taking inventory there against Cincinnati, you might be down your right tackle, might be down your top receiver. You've got a new quarterback now starting the games. There's just so many unknowns. David Quessenberry and Blake Brandel might be the right side of your line. But again, you won the game yesterday. So now you have just the littlest bit of wiggle room if you do lose to Cincinnati to still make that playoff run going into the final 3 games. We'll get into what's next for the Vikings and talk about this defense that is now top 5 in the league after a word from Prize Picks. Yes, Prize Picks is, simply put, the best way to play daily fantasy sports of any possible option, because you're not battling thousands of other players, including the pros and the sharks. It's you against the numbers, mano a mano. Pick between 2 and 6 stat projections. You go more, you go less, and that's how you win. And you can do cross-sport stat projections. So you can get something from the Wolves, something from the Vikings if you want to keep it local, and you can stack those up, have a 6-stat ticket, and watch the money come in. So you could do like Justin Jefferson yards if he plays next week, and Karl-Anthony Towns points, something like that. And if you have an injury like Anthony Edwards in the Wolves game a couple days ago, they offer a reboot policy. So your entries will reboot if a player gets hurt in the first half and does not return in the second. They're the only DFS platform with an injury insurance policy. So you pick the stats, pick the players, watch the winnings come in, have a ton of fun at Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Vikings are 7-6, thanks in large part to their defense, who almost lost a 3rd consecutive game where they were freaking awesome. And if they had let up a game-winning drive for a 3rd straight week after playing brilliantly for 3 3/4 quarters, that would have been devastating. But they complete the shutout, moving them to top 5 in points allowed in defense. They are just behind the 49ers, Ravens, Chiefs, and Cowboys defensively. Yes, I know they played Aiden O'Connell, but they keep doing this, Arif. They keep making young quarterbacks look absolutely inept at football. And I think that's the mark of a pretty good defense.
Yeah, there are a lot of bad defenses, or you would call them bad. I mean, who knows what the Bears are week to week. A lot of bad defenses, but that they have looked really good against. But you take a look at how those offenses, or bad offenses, you take a look at how those offenses have performed over the course of the season. The Vikings have held them to their lowest or second lowest point total of the year. The Bears, for example, had their second lowest point total. The lowest was to Kansas City. We all know how good that defense was when it was healthy, right? The Raiders have not had a shutout all year, right? So obviously that was the lowest that they allowed. And the second lowest was 10 points. That was early in the season. The second lowest in the Aiden O'Connell era was 13 points. That was to another elite defense, the Miami defense. If you take a look at post week 5, right? So the Kevin Seifert article that we've all been referencing about the nature of the defense is that after week 4, before week 5, they modified their approach pretty heavily, and it's essentially a completely different defense than it was in the first 4 weeks. Okay, let's take them at their word. If we take a look at, expected points per play over the course of the season, they're 5th, right? They're behind the Browns and the Ravens, and you already named them, right? So that's fantastic. But if you take a look at it since week 4, first of all, the Browns defense has fallen off, right? But yeah, so they're behind the Browns, Ravens, Cowboys, and Jets. But if you take a look at it since from week 5 on, so after week 4, they're number 3 to the Jets and the Dolphins, right? If you do it from points per game, they're 5th. But if you do it since week 5, they're tied for 1st with San Francisco, right? This is good. I don't know how else to put it. This is extremely good. And the thing is, it's happening without the kind of talent that you would typically associate with it. And we could be misjudging the talent, right? I'm fully willing to say, hey, I'm undercounting the contributions of Harrison Phillips. I'm not doing a very good job of correctly evaluating Danielle Hunter, who I consider to be just outside of elite range, but certainly not in that range. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should think about Josh Metellus consistently as a Pro Bowler instead of like, hey, he's like this weird gadget guy. That's kind of weird. Or I should talk about Cam Bynum as like a Pro Bowl safety, right? And maybe I'm doing that wrong. But you take a look at these defenses and the types of players they have, like Nick Bosa and Myles Garrett, right? You take a look at, the high level performances that they're putting together with their secondary players, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Talanoa Hufanga, right? Like for
Ron Bland.
49ers. Yeah, DeRon Bland is leading the league in pick sixes, right? So like Micah Parsons, right? These are all teams that have defensive player of the year candidates, right? And their second best defensive player might have been worthy of being put on that DPOI. Like, it's just crazy how the level of talent that stacked with Pro Bowlers and all pros versus this Vikings defense, which there's a couple of Pro Bowlers. There's a guy that might, Danielle Hunter probably won't at this point, but may make an all pro squad. But that's where we're at. Like, I think that's incredible. It's remarkable. This is someone DM'd me last night and was like, hey, is this like one of the best defensive coordinator performances in the modern era? And I was like, yeah, I'll break it down later in the season, but you might be right. Like, given the level of talent that they had and given the performance the defense had the year prior, that's pretty good.
And all of this is in a new scheme that the NFL has not seen before, like these particular front structures mixed with these particular coverages. It's all new, and that part of why young quarterbacks are so flustered, because they've never seen anything like this before. Veteran quarterbacks haven't seen anything.
Yeah,
like
veterans
this before,
are like,
so
what's this?
Yeah, even offenses that we see as some of the best in the league, like the 49ers, didn't have a great day. And part of that was flustering Brock Purdy, but they also corralled Christian McCaffrey in that game, right? The Vikings corralled Josh Jacobs, suffocated the Josh Jacobs run game. He was the rushing leader last year. They have accomplished a lot. And I think a big reason that we're getting more production out of guys that we didn't necessarily expect a lot of production from, like Josh Metellus or Cam Bynum, who are day 3 draft picks, right? Caleb Evans, day 3 draft pick. Byron Murphy, we all like him. He's a good corner, but we go, is he even a cornerback 1, or is he, maybe just a good 2? Like, is he the Trey Waynes level of guy? Like, that's kind of was the discussion in the offseason. And I think a big reason we're getting in, especially in the secondary, the production that we're getting out of those guys is because this scheme is predicated on rallying and tackling. And it like one of the weaknesses, I guess you would say, of this is that there are a lot of situations where if one guy misses a tackle, it can go explosive. And so everyone has to be a really good tackler. And if you were going to look at Josh Metellus and ask him to do one thing all day, I would say tackle and then like peanut punch and be a fumble forcer on those tackles is like the talent that he has on. I mean, it's versatility is a huge deal, but if you were ever to just boil him down to one thing, tackling is probably like the one thing you trust the most about him. And putting those players in the situation where they're good at the one thing you trust them the most to do is foundational to coaching and part of why this DC performance has worked so well. I want to plug the last 3 articles that I wrote for Arif's Substack. One was about this in the Flores defense, and then one about how they should bench Dobbs, and then one about how cool Ivan Pace is. So if you enjoyed some of the things the Vikings did well in this game, you should check out those articles.
Ivan Pace, number 1
Agreed.
graded linebacker in week 14.
Figure out who can push back on that.
Right.
When we
God,
buried this
Ivan Pace had
defense in
such a game,
April, and say again, Arif.
Sorry, Ivan Pace had such a good game.
Insane game.
So fun
Yeah.
to watch.
And a lot of it had to do with the
first
front
quarter.
too.
Yeah.
Like the defensive line, I think, like Danielle Hunter owns some of the credit for that Ivan Pace game, just because of like setting the edge really well, and forcing running backs to cut back, and then Ivan Pace can really well attack that cutback lane. So he made a great play too, but like those plays don't happen without Harrison Phillips, and I think Bird had a really good game. And
I would say Hunter owns a lot of people's statistics. Like he owns DJ
for sure.
sack, and he helped with Harrison Phillips' sack. Like it is kind of funny. And Harrison Smith helped the DJ one sack too. But like it is kind of funny how Danielle Hunter ended with like 2 tackles and like 1 quarterback hit, and he was
One
like one of the most
hit
impactful players in the game.
Yeah.
But it was like nose tackle type stuff where it's like, no, you just
Yeah.
have to watch the game. I
Work.
promise he was big. But yeah, Ivan Pace had a remarkable game. 8 combined tackles in the first quarter, over 19 plays. Over 19 plays, he had 8 combined tackles. And it very much seemed like the Raiders were trying to adjust to get away from Ivan Pace after that, which is crazy. He's an undrafted rookie linebacker who has he started more than one game before this? I don't think so. But it's just like, the Vikings starting linebacker is injured, right? And I say starting linebacker because they very often only play one. But it's like crazy.
I think it's like his third start because Hicks has been out for a while.
Yeah. It's like crazy that he had that big impact. And the only time he was ever, quote unquote, really exploited in coverage was the 2-minute drill, where actually it was better to give up that completion over the middle anyway, because you brought the guy down and wasted seconds off the clock, and they had poor time management. So they didn't score off of that 2-minute drill, despite stringing together completion after completion. And Luke, you didn't get to see this, but like the broadcast was praising Aiden O'Connell during the end of half 2-minute drill for his command of the offense. And it was like,
okay,
was that Mark Sanchez? Was Sanchez saying that? Because Sanchez
I think so, yeah. I think it was the color guy, so it would be Sanchez. Yeah, 68 seconds left on the clock, backed up on your own 10, 1 timeout, and it's like 11-yard completion, 13-yard completion, 12-yard completion. It's like, yeah, bud, that's helping you.
Yeah.
You're scoring some points there.
That drive ended in an Ivan Pace sack.
Yes. And so if you took away, because he had the 24-yarder to Devontae Adams at the end of the game, and then he had like some 30-odd, almost 40 yards in that he had 171 passing yards in the game. If you take away 65 of his yards or whatever, oh, bud.
Yeah.
Oh, pal.
Handed him. And when it comes to like the defense, but it was Aiden O'Connell. Nobody else shut him out. That's what you like. Everybody else got to play Aiden O'Connell too. Nobody else shut him out.
Yeah.
Both the Raiders and the Vikings simultaneously experienced the other like young upstart. Well, I guess Dobbs isn't young, like new upstart quarterback turning back to a pumpkin in real time. Like that's what happened that's why it was a historically bad game. The second,
and now the Raiders got revenge gamed by Nick Mullens.
Right, I forgot about that angle.
There were a ton of revenge game opportunities in this game. Amir
Jake
Abdullah
Browning coming up next.
Yeah, Janarius Robinson sack.
Yeah, Janarius Robinson sack. Yep. Amir Abdullah having the longest Raiders run of the game for 12 yards. There's a couple more.
Do we have an ex-Raider other than Mullens?
Probably
somewhere.
Yeah, probably someone that had a practice squad, whatever, with them or something.
Yeah.
Bengals next, Saturday noon, and then Lions. We'll get deep into Bengals on Thursday, but I think more importantly, like we alluded to earlier, is just sort of the scenarios that could play out here. Let's assume Green Bay wins tonight. They'll be 7-6. They would both be in playoff position with 3, 6, and 7 teams hot on their heels. Vikings will own a lot of tiebreakers as it stands now, but it gets messy. Like if you get 3 team tiebreakers, then the head-to-heads don't matter anymore, and you're looking at conference record. It's messy. The Vikings did themselves a favor by losing to a number of AFC West teams, so the NFC record is fairly strong.
Yeah, they have really good tiebreakers.
The playoff positioning is robust for Minnesota, and I keep saying it, but a Vikings-Lions wild card looks increasingly probable. 3 games in 4 weeks, which is going to be wild. And I think if you split between those 2 games with them, that is more than likely what's going to happen. Let's get into all that on Thursday on the Minnesota Football Party. Luke Ginman will be back. Ron Johnson will join. You can hear the audio of this show, the Locked On Vikings audio feed, wherever you get your podcasts. Find the video on Locked On Sports Minnesota or the 24/7 YouTube live stream, where you can also find Wolves, Wild, Gophers, all the Minnesota sports. Before we go, Luke Braun, any notable bets or wagers you'd like to share, good or bad, from your time in Vegas?
Pretty good time on the Vegas Scrambles. We had I hit the under in the parlays for this. Also had the under there. We also parlayed interception over half an interception for Josh Dobbs and Aiden O'Connell, which felt like a good bet. And I do think that if Dobbs had stayed in, we would have hit that. I also took Vikings -3 push. And then we got real hot at the craps table. So I'm leaving up.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, heck yeah. Well done. Was it like, were you playing pass line and points or pass line?
Line and then
field?
6 and 8. Yeah.
Pass line 6 and 8.
Wait. How was Voltaggio's?
Yes, went to Retro by Voltaggio, which was fine. I don't think I'd go back, but it was a cool novelty. It's like it's a pop-up that they have for only like a year that's based on like entirely nostalgia. So they had like super chefy recreation of like SpaghettiOs. And you can tell it's like the TV dinners they had growing up, like super chefed out. It was very fun, and it's like super cute. They've got like VCRs all over and like cassette tapes
like,
and all this like
they're
nostalgia.
like brothers who like fight.
It's like the toys they played with growing up, and it's like a beat up box. So I'm pretty sure it might be actually like the version of like Trouble that they had at their house growing up. It was very cute.
Well, obviously, I made the wrong decision because I sent my other friends in Vegas $25, and I said, I want you to go get a $25 chip, throw it on the craps table, and say quarter hard 8, and then you can keep half the winnings. And apparently, they threw it down. First roll, 3 and 4, 7 out.
Yep.
Which is close to 4 and 4, but sounds like I should have sent that money to you because you had the hot table.
Yep.
Yeah, but not giving
we
you
like
the
showed up.
So
My dad and I showed up. We both bet the same thing. The shooter got hot. I waited until I had doubled what I had put down, and then I was like, okay, I doubled my money, I'm out. And he said, no, I'm gonna just ride out the rest of this shooter, and made like $200 more. So I definitely should have done that.
Yeah, craps will get you because on a hot shooter, you inevitably have more bets on the table, and when
and at a certain point, you've like made your money back, so you might as well just kind of let it keep going until you lose it. But I was like, I've doubled my money, I'll get out.
Yeah, no, I mean, smart on your part because you can like get a hot shooter and then put you have $100 in bets on the table. They 7 out. Well, you lost a lot of what you just won.
Yeah,
but that's craps for you. A lot of fun. For Arif Hasan, Luke Braun, I'm Sam Ekstrom. Thursday's show, talk about the Cincinnati Bengals on the Minnesota Football Party.